Welcome to today's presentation. Our presentation today shall be titled Boost Productivity and We Grow, as China did it, so we can. Now, today's presentation is meant to enable us to interrogate and, analyze and come up with solutions or thoughts in terms of how we can introduce, or rather how we can promote productivity of our local enterprises, such that in the end of the day, as a country, we can boost growth. We are saying that, for China to grow into a level in which it is today, to a level that we know China is today, what it did was to boost the productivity of its local enterprises. Now, to set the ball rolling in today's topic, I would just want to start by giving a quote, or rather, and this is from an article. This article was done by two gentlemen, Zuli Hu and Mosin Han. Now, it's an International Monetary Fund, IMF article, and the article was titled, "Why is China growing so fast?" Yeah. Now, they've said a lot in the article with quite a number of analyses, but in summation, and I think that is what is important for purposes of today's discourse. They say that, and I quote, that an analysis of the pre- and post-1978 periods indicates that the market-oriented reforms undertaken by China were critical in creating this productivity boom. The reforms raised economic efficiency by introducing profit incentives to rural collective enterprises, which are owned by local government but are guided by market principles. The same also affected family farms, small private businesses, and foreign investors and traders. Yeah. So, in a sense, it is these market-oriented reforms which we shall find out formed the basis of the growth of these local enterprises into not just regional but also international entities that have today made China the country that we all know it to be. Yeah. Now, the Chinese example teaches us that we must deliberately put in measures, yeah? And this you can only do by carrying out a series of reforms, yeah, which have got the ultimate objective of boosting productivity. And of course, when you boost productivity, then what happens? Yeah, you shall then move the enterprises to the next level of mass production. When you move the enterprises to the level of mass production, then what happens? Of course, you get the leeway now into the international markets. You see, that is the reason as to why you will find Chinese pencils, Chinese comps, Chinese machines everywhere, including, name it, anywhere in Africa. Go to the to the lowest, or rather to the deep corners of our country, you will find their goods, you will find their materials. And we are saying this is because of that mass production. And that mass production has been occasioned or enabled by the boosting of productivity. Yeah. Now, if we come back to our local scenario, because it's not like we are saying that these things have not been replicated in our country. They have. Yeah, we have got certain good examples, of course by the national government and even some county governments, just to demonstrate what boosting of production can do. Yeah, how the boosting of production can even cause regions that were initially associated with disaster to turn into a beacon and an example in terms of how things ought to be done. Yeah. Now let me take the example of the Ukambani counties, and for those who have got the benefit of history, though not so long history, may be aware that sometimes back, when you talked of Ukambani counties, what ran in the minds of anyone was drought, was hunger. Yeah, I mean that was the badge for these particular counties. Yeah, but then that did not mean that those counties did not have something that was unique unto them. Yeah, and what am I talking about? The Ukambani counties realized and were cognizant of the fact that the areas in which they were placed by God apparently are conducive for the production of a variety of fruits. Yeah. So what happened, or what did they do? Those of you, or some of you, may be aware or have heard of the Kitui Enterprise Promotion Company Limited. You may have heard of the Makueni Fruits Processing Plant. Yeah? And what was the cumulative effect of these particular plants? The cumulative effect was that this particular processing plant, they process the fruits, for example, mango fruits, yeah, which of course thrive so well in these particular areas, into mango juice, some into powder, name it. Yeah. And what is the consequence of this? When you do this, then it means you increase the value chains. Yeah. There is what we call value addition. Yeah. And when you increase value addition, then you increase the income, yeah, the profits that accrue to the farmers. And in a sense, when there is increased income, increased profit, then definitely there is that incentive to do it even better, which means you then promote productivity. Yeah. So this is one way in which we realize that Kitui, Makueni, Machakos, or rather the Ukambani counties have taken advantage of that philosophy of using productivity, promoting or rather boosting productivity of their people, and therefore in the end of the day we can see the result in terms of increased income, in terms of better standards of living. Yeah, if I could say it, most of those farmers are women, majority are women, and with that, because of the increased productivity, definitely it means the families, the children have got a higher standards of life. Yeah? So that is one of the consequences that accrues when you improve or you increase and boost productivity. Yeah? I'd also give the example of Kitui County. Yeah? Now in Kitui County, we must all now be aware, definitely, of the garment factory known as the Kikotech, Kitui County Textile Center. Now, this is an enterprise that was formed basically for purposes of textile production, and of course, amongst others, they would make clothes for government tenders, clothes for chiefs and administrative officers in government. But then you all realized and you're aware, because there is something that has been globally acclaimed, that with the upsurge of the corona pandemic, the factory was suddenly turned into a surgical mask assembly overnight, with a production of around 30,000 face masks per day, which is a clear demonstration of how, of course, a regional government can take the deliberate initiative to identify markets. Yeah, once you identify the markets, then you put the infrastructure to increase productivity, to boost productivity, and at the end of the day, that would guarantee income, better standards of life, and of course even employment to the people who fall within that particular county. Yeah. I would also wish to comment, because this is something that is occurring today, even as I give my presentation in this discourse. There is the question of the persistent floods at the Kano Plains, which of course leads to, and has always led to, destruction of homes, destruction of properties, destruction of farms, and even as we speak, we have got quite a number of residents of Kisumu County who are not staying in their homes, maybe staying in tents or schools, with the cold and name it. And I'm saying that we really need to find a way in which this catastrophe can be dealt with once and for all. Yeah. And it's not like it is rocket science. I do honestly believe that there is something that can be done. Kano Plains in Kenya is not the first place to have experienced flooding throughout the world. Yeah? There are, in other jurisdictions, places which have experienced flooding, and something was done, a solution was done, and we can look into those solutions and see how we can replicate the same and domesticate them in Kano Plains in Kisumu, of course, with some sort of ingenious innovation to suit our local circumstances. In fact, one of the proposals that I would give is for the creation of what is called a sponge city, yeah, either by our governments or maybe through public-private partnerships, yeah, so that we create what would be called a sponge city, whose object is to hold, to clean, and to harness these waters into something that is it ought to be done in a way that is economically sustainable, and the same water then can be redirected, yeah, for other uses. For example, irrigation. The same can also be further processed into clean water that can even be used for drinking. Yeah. Now, you find this is a concept that has been used and done in other places. Yeah. For example, and I started by using the example of China, so I would still stick to that. In the city of Wuhan in China, they had this massive project called the Garden Expo Park project, which covers around 30 kilometers square of landmass. And what they basically did is that, the rainwater therein is collected, it is purified, yeah, such that around 70% of it is, retained for sprinkling into this park. And this park has suddenly turned into a zone of major economic activity. The land is now seriously rejuvenated and reclaimed, yeah, such that it's become an economic bastion even to the residents, who now can see and appreciate the nature of development and how you can just turn nature and something which seemed to have been a disaster into, a major economic player to change the lives of the people to the positive. Yeah. In fact, I want to honestly believe that using that example, the Chinese example, it is very possible that our water engineers can, of course, study the guidelines, but innovatively come up with our own homegrown solutions, yeah, which would interrogate, the guidelines that the Chinese use, and let us come up with our own relevant formula in terms of course, after investigating, the relevant parameters, for example, the topography, the rainfall characteristics, and all those other factors, yeah. So that, in a sense, what I'm saying is that it is very possible that that landmass at the Kano Plains, which more or less like 2-3 times in a year turns into a disaster, turns into pain, yeah, there's a sense in which we can have that land reclaimed. There's a sense in which we can convert it into something which is positive, such that it is not that the waters should be a source of death and destruction. No, but that water can be a source of irrigation. It can be a source of drinking water. It can be a source of, feeding, proper gardens and parks that would attract tourists, and so many other activities that would be of, activities that would generate income and therefore be of economic value to the entire membership, the people that reside within the Kano Plains. Yeah? On a flip side, I would suggest also that we really need to consider doing a comprehensive reform, especially on our land law regime, to address certain areas that may act as bottlenecks in terms of production. Yeah? And I say this because, as you would understand, in as much as in the Chinese example, I talked of land that is collectively owned, but you see, you also have individual ownerships, yeah, and of course, in our context, land is ordinarily owned by individuals. So I would urge, amongst others, that one, we must find a formula through which the vast number of lands that fell within the context of the former city councils, county councils, and municipal councils, yeah? And you know that those entities issued letters of allotment, but the problem is those letters of allotment are not, they don't have, they don't have registrable, they are not registered rights. In other words, they are not documents that you can even use as security to secure finance from financial institutions. Yeah? So that then acts as at the end, it acts as a hindrance to productivity, because one needs, rather, an entrepreneur needs to be sure that the title that he has is one that he can convert into finance through securitization using our banking process. So to that extent, I would urge that we come with ways through which that process of registration of such letters of allotments to secure proprietary rights, that process needs to be fastened. As it stands now, it's quite some tedious process involving a lot of protocol, and it takes so long, so that so many people just give up along the way. I tend to think that that is something which we really need to relook. In fact, if it can be possible, then the process should be localized in the sense that it should be possible that allotments, it should be possible that letters of allotments from, for example, the defunct municipal council of Kisumu, it should be that it can be possible that you can secure the registration certificate in respect of that particular land within the land registry in Kisumu, yeah, even if it has to be the NLC, but then let it be that its local agency, yeah, should be in a position to ratify and enable the easy acquisition of title in respect of that allotment. I would also think that we need to seriously relook the succession process. And I'm looking at the Succession Act in two ways. So essentially, I would suggest that the process of succession that would, in the end of the day, ensure that beneficiaries to the estates of the deceased are in a position to secure registrable rights as far as the land parcels are concerned. I do think that the process ought to be hastened. As we speak, under ordinary circumstances, the courts would take around 9 months at the earliest to have the entire process done to conclusion. I tend to think that is a major hindrance, especially in a scenario where you're saying you have persons that are actively and seriously using these lands in question as a process of as a way of driving the economic engine. Yeah. So I think that if such processes can be fastened, then it would be better. Of course, still on the flip side, still touching on the same Succession Act and on the question of women, I would also think that it's important that there are more proactive interpretation and enforcement of the Succession Act is done. And why am I saying this? You find that there is a sense in which, by virtue of our society being patriarchal, there's a way in which widows and women are ordinarily overlooked and are still not properly protected in terms of securing of their rights when it comes to land. So I tend to think that we would need a stricter and a more serious enforcement of this particular act. And I'm saying this bearing in mind, and you realize that most of our small enterprises are basically driven and owned by women, so that it only makes sense that such women then have got that capacity and are enabled through ownership and vesting with titles to then be in a position, if need be, to promote growth in their enterprises by being in a position to then charge properties and secure capital and finance, which would then move their businesses to the next level that will lead to a boosting of productivity. I would also suggest, and I think that is key, that even as we want to boost productivity, like we said, yeah, and even as we look into the markets, then it would be key that our county governments, rather all county governments, and of course by extension also the national government, because it's got chains throughout the country, that we take the step of once you identify, and that I'm talking of agriculture, that a particular area is best in the production of a particular crop or whatever, then the next thing that ought to be done is to creation of collection centers, yeah, which would take up the key role of distribution and supply chain networks of this farm produce. And this is important because it would enable the negotiation of better prices for the farmers. When they do it as a team, negotiating the prices is better than when you leave each farmer for himself, because then they get susceptible to the whims and caprices of the middlemen who destroy the price, and then farming then becomes a meaningless business. So I would really call for that aspect of creation of collection centers, by probably our county governments. Of course, in the last discussion, we talked of the question of fishing industry, and I gave the example and proposal that perhaps we could think along the lines of having all the fish farmers put up together in some strong circle, and then maybe the county governments can find a way of partnering with these circle societies in creating some fish processing plant, so that once you have that fish processing plant, then we secure the value addition aspect of it, and of course then the county government and its agencies would then also play a role, probably in terms of securing markets, maybe even international markets, such that when the fish is exported, then what is the result? Because of the value addition, we see higher prices, we see higher income for our fish farmers, we see a boost in productivity, and of course in the end of the day our economy grows. That would also be a benefit to the county government, because when the enterprise succeeds, because you are partners, you also get income. So in a sense, those are the series of points that we had today for discussion in terms of productivity. How can we promote the productivity of our local enterprises, or what are some of those reforms that we can just craft to make it happen? So the question is out there. I've raised the issues. It's now upon you to interrogate them, to discuss them, and thank you.